Greetings and welcome to our picks podcast for UFC 299. A great card from top to bottom here, not just from a fan perspective, but from a betting perspective as well. We're going to be breaking down the entire main card as well as some of the prelim fights here, giving our full thoughts, in-depth analysis after doing our hours of research, tape study, etc., etc. I'm here, of course, joined by Liam Heslin. I am Luca Fury. Want to get straight to the fight breakdowns here, but I do want to remind you guys we do have a bunch of content over on our Patreon page. We have official bets, of course, available, as well as other types of content, video breakdowns, betting instructionals, you name it, picks articles. There's so much content over there. I don't want to go through the whole list of all. I'm sure you guys are tired of hearing me be like a broken record and to list that every episode. So you know where to find it, patreon.com/FuriousFightPicks if you are not already subscribed. But with that aside, let's get right into the first fight of the night, of course. Well, first fight of the podcast, I should say. Of course, the last fight of the night, the main event of the evening. We have a very interesting rematch here between Marlon Chito Vera and Sean O'Malley. Currently, O'Malley is about a 3-1 favorite out there. I know that certainly surprised some people, myself included, of course. Curious to get your thoughts here on this, Liam. Here, obviously, Chito won the first time round by first round knockout. Pretty decisive victory there, despite the leg injury. Curious, do you see it going differently this time? And if so, are you surprised by where the line is?
Yeah, Luke, I think it's a fascinating fight, and we've got dogs barking this weekend. My dog just sprinted on in here when we're starting the show. So it seems like an omen of something. But when you're looking at a fight like this, man, the last fight that gave me this gut feeling was when Sean Strickland took on Israel Adesanya. And one of my biggest betting regrets in the last couple of years was that I didn't bet on Sean Strickland in that fight, right? He was a plus 500 underdog. And I said all week, I was like, this line is too wide, right? This line's too wide, but I didn't end up betting on it. And I just sat there with that opinion all week. I remember I looked back at my write-up and I had said Sean Strickland money line in the fight not to go the distance. Those were kind of the reads that I had on the fight. Then Sean drops him in the first round. Can't get in on the live bet anymore, right? That's gone. It's just I just felt so foolish having not bet it when that was my overall read. And all week I've been doing my shows and I've been, talking about this fight. And I've been saying all week, the line feels a little bit wide and it does feel a little bit presumptuous, but ultimately I just think O'Malley's going to find a way to win. Why? I feel like I was almost just buying into what I was being told by the UFC, right? Sean O'Malley, he's the star, he's the guy, he's this and that. But the truth is, man, I haven't had much desire to bet on Sean O'Malley fights, right? If you just look at his record in the UFC, I realized last time out, I was like, Aljamain is a guy I really like. He's a guy that I feel is a very quality champion. Everybody hates on the guy. I think he stinks. I was like, you know what? My biases here would tell me to bet on Aljamain, but I'm not laying minus 240 against an O'Malley in Boston, right? That just seems like a negative EV proposition long term. And it didn't turn out very well for Aljamain backers that night. And so I bet on Aljo to the tune of a lot of profit, but I realized it's the time to get off the train, right? For Chito Vera, I've actually had a pretty decent read on him throughout his career. A little bit up and down. I've tried to fade him a couple more times than was worthy, right? And so as I'm preparing to do my write-up for this fight, Luke, I'm looking at all the guys Chito Vera's fought. The guy's been in the company 10 years. He's fought an absolute murderer's row. And so when you look, yeah, he doesn't have a perfect winning record, right? He doesn't go out there and win every fight. I think the worst showing he's ever had in the UFC in his modern iteration is that Corey Sandhagen fight. Kind of got stuck a little bit in the mud, took him too long to get started in that fight, rounds 4 and 5. You did see some of those things that make him a special guy, right? He's still around. He's hard to put away. Even if he's not having a great fight, he can eventually find his way into it. And those are the kind of things that you'd normally think of as championship kind of medal, right? A guy who can push hard for 5 rounds, a guy who's never been finished, a guy who's fought every comer along the way. And he grew up in front of a UFC audience. So yeah, he lost to Davey Grant, but then he whooped his ass years later. He kind of gave him his paybacks, right? You look at these guys, Chito Vera has actually done well in rematches, I should say, right? That's an example of one where, hey, you want to run it back? I'm better than I used to be. We have evidence that he could beat Sean O'Malley. We've seen that. That's been put on the record. We haven't seen the same from Sean. We have evidence that Chito Vera can go 5 hard rounds. We don't have that in evidence for Sean. So there's a lot of speculation, I feel, on the Sean O'Malley side. Yes, he's a star. Yes, he has a lot of interest from the fan base. But he's not the one who's getting the local crowd reception, right? You're hearing Chito, Chito. They're cheering over him as he's trying to talk at the press conference. These are a bunch of things that, for me, I wasn't expecting coming into this fight week, right? I was thinking, man, maybe Sean O'Malley really does have that star quality. But you listen to Aljo and he says, man, I'm disappointed I took that fight because I expected bigger pay-per-view returns. I expected more money. I expected, people to care more. And the truth is, this Sean O'Malley guy that everybody thinks people care about and thinks he's a star, it's just not translating the same way. That's what he said about his own pay-per-view showing, right? If anybody cares about the money there, it's the guy who didn't make as much money as he thought for taking a hard fight. If you remember, he took that under suboptimal circumstances, Luca. He was turned around very quickly. Hey, you just fought Henry Cejudo. Hey, you just have surgery or whatever. You're not feeling great. Doesn't matter. Go take the fight anyway. They wanted to see him lose. No problem. Why aren't we back in Boston? Why aren't we in New York? Why aren't we in a location where everybody's going to go crazy for this guy, Sean O'Malley? There's places, right? Why aren't we in Arizona, Phoenix? I don't know. But what we do have is a show in Miami, right? We're going to Miami where everybody is going to be cheering for the Spanish fighter, the local market fighter, the guy who is more like them. He looks more like them. He talks more like them. He sounds like them. He speaks their language. That's what I'm seeing, right? He's got freaking how many people coming out there? 50 people to do like a Spanish language press conference. I've never seen that before. I watch this every week, right? I watch the press conferences. I watch all that stuff. And one thing I noticed, Luca, is these things tend to come in threes. All right. And what I'm noticing is you've got a brand new champion from South Africa. His name is Dricus du Plessis. We were here for it. We told you it was going to happen. There was a brand new champion. His name is Ilia Topuria. He's from Spain. Never been done before. Said it was going to happen. And when you're looking at this guy, Chito Vera, he checks a lot of the same boxes for me. Is he a traditional build for a champion? No, he is not. But he's more like that Michael Bisping build. By the way, same boxing coach, Jason Perillo, stuck around a really long time, figured it out eventually, only works with a select group of people, right? Not with everybody, just with these championship fighters. He stuck around with this guy the whole damn time, even after he tells Mackenzie Dern to go pound sand. Interesting. When you look at this guy, I think he believes in himself. I don't think he's a quitter. I don't think he's a bitch. I don't think he's going to go in there and phone it in. I don't think he's going to give you a half-ass effort. I think he's put 10 years into a career to try and get something out of it, and he has it all coming down to Saturday night. That's not a guy I want to put my money against, not at minus 300, certainly. So for me, the more I've thought about this, I'm picking Chito Vera to win the fight outright, Luca.
Yeah, on the note, you talk about the whole card being in Miami, obviously big Latino crowd there and everything. Obviously, the crowd is going to be on Vera's side. That is a good note to point out for the viewers. So we talk about, of course, as you just mentioned, the Sterling situation, very clear who they wanted to win there. I mean, that was as obvious as it gets. And they will do that on the way up. You'll have Paddy Pimblett matched up against Tony Ferguson when Pimblett's on a 6-fight winning streak and Ferguson's on a 6-fight losing streak. The UFC will be not at all subtle in showing their hand in terms of who they're trying to build up, who they're trying to get to the title. But here's the thing, and here's why I always talk about when you're in terms of analyzing these types of guys, like an Ian Gary, for example, who's kind of in that current spot. They'll hold their hand and basically give them an easy path to the title where it's almost a gimme. But once they get to the title, if they win it, the UFC takes the training wheels off. You're on your own. They're giving you the number one contenders. Now they're concerned about marketable fighters, not just overall in terms of, is this a guy we can market overall in terms of fight after fight? Or in this case, hey, we have a show in Miami. Who would be good to headline that card? Oh, this guy who's a title challenger right now. That's the UFC's MO. They do not protect fighters once they become champions, generally speaking. It's up until they become champions, but once they're there, the UFC is like, all right, you're on your own. We're giving you the top contenders now. And so it is something to note when you have a guy like Sean O'Malley, who, let's be honest, he did get a relatively easy path to the title. He didn't face guys like Merab in that. He shouldn't have got the decision over Petr Yan, although it was a close decision. It wasn't like, an insane 30-27 robbery or something, but he didn't deserve that. Then they gave him Sterling in, as you mentioned, O'Malley in Boston, Sterling on short notice there off the injury and everything. Again, their hand was clearly revealed. And now, as you said, why aren't they doing O'Malley in Boston again or something? It's clear this is now just what I mentioned. The training wheels are off with Sean, and he is now on his own. So in terms of judging, maybe we still get some judging bias for him, but other than that, you're not seeing the same situation where he was against, say, Petr Yan or Aljamain Sterling, where the UFC was like doing all this nice stuff for him behind the scenes, basically rolling out the red carpet, doing everything they could for him, while also kind of sabotaging his opponents in a subtle way as well. So that is something to note here. The UFC is not just putting all their eggs in the Sean O'Malley basket once again. They are just basically somewhat of a neutral party now, it seems. And that does matter to an extent. Not that the UFC fixes fights, but they do have some level of influence in certain ways. The crowd also has some level of influence in certain ways. And if we're talking about a competitive fight that could potentially go the distance, that crowd very well could play a factor and could actually cancel out any potential bias that there is for the Golden Boy Sean O'Malley on the judges' scorecards. So I think it's definitely an interesting rematch. I think it should be closer regardless of who you pick here. I don't understand why Sean O'Malley is a 3-1 favorite. I definitely can understand picking him, but when you look at the breakdown of the skill set and the matchup, as some of the comments here, when I actually go down, Joshua pointed out, Vera starts slow, looking to live bet him after he loses round 1. I think he will get the finish in 3 or 4. I did a free podcast earlier in the week just talking about the main event, and I echo those sentiments. Chito Vera, he basically can't win a first round. Like, the only first round he's won is actually knocking out O'Malley the last time. Other than that, this dude is basically guaranteed to lose either 1, if not 2, of the first rounds, and then in round 3, he starts to turn it on. So every time I like Chito Vera in a matchup, and we can go back and listen to my past podcasts, I always say, just wait till I bet him. Oh, yeah, little dog joining the show here. I always say, just wait till I bet him. You're going to get a better price after after round 1. If he loses round 2, you're definitely going to get a way better price. And then he'll turn it on in round 3. At that point, he might win 3, 4, 5, or he might get the finish. That's what he did against, say, Dominic Cruz. That's what he did against Rob Font. And in those situations, I waited to bet him until after he did poorly early on, and I got a much better line than I did pre-fight. So in this situation, maybe you want to play, just the pre-fight angle on, take the value on Chito Vera, but it's probably best just to wait until at least 1 round here and try to get him live. The issue with him is he's skilled, he's well-rounded. Oh, go ahead, Liam.
I just wanted to point out one thing as well, because my thought was I want to, save some bullets in the chamber to live bet Chito in this fight for the very reasons you mentioned. But the one danger, I think, is that Sean, like I mentioned, that Sean Strickland fight, that's the reason it comes to mind, because that was my other impression. I was like, let me see how Sean's doing. Let me see how he's managing the fight, and then I'll try and get in live. And the problem was he dropped him so early in that fight that the live odds went to like minus 110, plus 110, whatever it was. Very close odds after he was plus 500. So the one thing I would say is if you have a goal to live bet him or a plan to live bet him, I would put a part of your investment before the fight, because we also know he could finish him in the first round. So that's the other thing that we have in evidence. So I just wanted to point that out. I think the live betting angle is wise and sharp, but also you may just want to have a little bit of your coverage in case the opportunity doesn't arise for whatever reason.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, too, because a lot of the times when I've talked about the angle with Chito, he's like minus 150 or plus 150. You can get him at like plus 230 now. It's a significant underdog line here. So I agree, if you want to take the safe route, bet a little bit pre-fight, but also be looking for after round 1. I would say probably look to live bet him in round 2. I don't know if he's going to straight up drop the first 2. I think it's most likely he'll drop the first, or it'll be close, and maybe the line's about the same. But losing both the first 2, I'm not sure about that. I think he actually might turn it up a little bit earlier in this one, because, as you hear at the seat, Matt Dunbar pointed out, what is O'Malley better at than Chito besides punching? Chito may even be the better striker. When kicks and chin and durability are involved, grappling and toughness plus 5-round experience go to Chito as well. And that is the thing. O'Malley, he's maybe better in terms of range punching, but other than that, he's not really better at anything, even in the striking. And he's doing interviews this week saying, I think I'm by far the best striker in MMA. There's not even anybody close to me in terms of my technique. I'm sorry, it does not matter if you like or hate Sean O'Malley. That is pure delusion. There is zero argument you can make, unless you are a delusional jackass, that this dude is even close to the best technical striker in MMA. He's just not. It's just, there's no argument for that. And so if he's thinking that, and he's getting overconfident and cocky, and he does seem like the type of guy who would be overconfident and cocky, that worries me against a guy who already knocked him out in the first round from full guard, keep in mind. When do you see full guard knockouts? Even back in the day, I've always pointed this out. Tito Ortiz used to knock out guys in the guard back in the day, and even then you can go and hear the broadcast. Joe Rogan will be like, it's so rare to see a guy knocking a guy out from guard. And that was back in the early 2000s when guys had atrocious defensive guards in MMA. It is almost unheard of to get KO'd from guard in the modern era or even the older times. And so for O'Malley to just get dusted effortlessly from guard like that, leg injury or not, keep in mind he was going for arm bars and triangles when it happened, so his legs weren't hurt that bad. Like, that is a legitimate concern. We know basically Vera can one-shot him here. We know he's better on the ground, on paper, and in practice. So Matt pointed out, and others in the chat have said here, what really is O'Malley's like dominant aspect here to get him to be minus 300? This is a hype line and nothing more. I think you can make the case for O'Malley being the favorite. You think he's going to dart around the range. Vera's going to not have a good start. He's going to be down 0-2, and then Vera just has to, or excuse me, O'Malley just has to win one of the last three. I totally understand that argument, but to say 75%, 3-1 for O'Malley, I just can't get behind it. So for me, I think it's a
stats-based argument. I think the only people that really believe like O'Malley is going to justify this price are the people that look at his metrics on paper, which are very good. But Luca, to your point, Cheeto has worse metrics, but he's fighting elite fighters all throughout his run for the most part, right? Like a lot of the guys that O'Malley hasn't had to fight, he did fight. Jose Aldo, Rob Font, guys that can really fight on the feet and can bang. The thing that stood out to me about that Jose Aldo fight on rewatch, Jose Aldo didn't want nothing to do with Cheeto Vera on the feet by round 3. I don't think people remember that, but literally the reason he went for that back take is because he was like, I will not survive 5 more minutes of this. So I'm going to hold on to this guy. And Cheeto was pissed because he was like, man, this guy's just going to hold on to me and not fight me the rest of the way because he knew it. But that's the kind of thing where he's been in those experiences. He's fought these former champions. Sean O'Malley went from fighting Pedro Munoz, no contest, to then 2 wins over guys you've heard of, 2 relevant wins in the UFC. The Almeida win is and I'm talking about Tomas Almeida was a guy that was relevant when I first started watching fighting, 10 years ago or something. He's not really been relevant since. So when you look at those, names on paper, he doesn't have the same resume as Cheeto. Fact.
Yeah, and the thing is, when Vera gets going, his skill set is actually very good. It's crazy that it takes him so long. He's extremely durable. Oh, where's the camera? He's extremely durable. He has power, obviously, we've seen with punches and kicks. Well-rounded grappling game. Not the best dominant offensive wrestler, but defensive wrestling on point. Cardio, like everything basically across the board in terms of being a solid, well-rounded, durable, powerful, finishing type of fighter. He has all of those. And so that's why a guy like Aldo, once Cheeto actually turned it on, he was kind of like, okay, not really interested in the firefight anymore. Is O'Malley going to want to get into that kind of firefight? We saw against Piotr Jan, he got rocked there when he tried to firefight with him. So I just feel like, again, maybe O'Malley goes out there and still wins. I think that's absolutely realistic. But I feel like no matter who wins this fight, you're going to sit here going, I don't understand why that was 300. Maybe he goes out there and, has a competitive fight and eventually knocks out Vera. Maybe it goes to decision that he wins. But either way, I don't think he's going to look like a 300 here. So overall, I guess I will go with Vera for my official prediction. I think fight's basically a toss-up, but I'll go with the dog. And I definitely think in terms of the bet, it is a dog or pass situation. Speaking of bets, before we get on to the co-main event, again, we do have a bunch of official bets up right now on Patreon, patreon.com/Fury's Fight Picks. That is available in the betting tier. We have bets from Liam as well as some other handicappers, but since Liam's here joining with me, your thoughts on this card from a betting perspective?
Yeah, I think we got a really fascinating fight card. And the one fight that I think we should touch on that's not on the main card, perhaps, is the Jailton Almeida and Curtis Blades fight. Reason being, I think that on almost any fight card throughout the year, this is like a main card bout, right? We got 2 top heavyweights
Great fight.
For the title of the best grappler in the heavyweight division. And once I heard that implication from Curtis Blades, I wanted to just bet against him, right? Like, I just think of this guy as a little bit overconfident. You look at Curtis throughout his career, and he's got great wins. He's got great, showings throughout his career, but it's also intermixed with a lot of big mistakes, right? Like costly mistakes against Sergey Pavlovich. He goes out there, he attempts 1 takedown. He gets brutalized on the feet trying to exchange with a guy who's much faster, a better boxer. So he didn't really have a good showing there. By the way, never came close to getting to his hips, didn't sniff a takedown at all. Then you look at the Derek Lewis fight, 7 significant strikes later, the guy's asleep on the floor for, 5 minutes at a time. And again, I'm not trying to make light of that fact. I'm just saying that the guy that is getting criticized for a Derek Lewis fight this week is Jailton Almeida. And what he did in that fight is dominate, 23 out of 25 minutes. He won every wrestling exchange, basically, that got extended. He dominated in the grappling, attempted submissions early, realized, hey, this guy isn't going to quit easily. I don't want to get tired and then be stuck out here for another 4 rounds with this guy. So I'm going to manage my energy and out wrestle him for 25 minutes. Most guys in the heavyweight division can't wrestle for 25 minutes. How do I know that? Curtis Blades is the best wrestler we have on paper in the division. When he tried to wrestle Volkov for 25 minutes, the man almost went into cardiac arrest, right? Volkov's taking him down in the 4th and 5th round and giving him real problems in that fight. And then Dana White afterwards says, if you're going to talk like you're a big guy and you're a scary guy and you're going to do all these things and nobody wants to fight you, and then you go out and fight like that, you're going to look really stupid. That's what he had to say about Curtis Blades, right? Not very nice things overall. That was a couple of years ago, but have you heard him do a lot of interviews about how he loves Curtis Blades and just can't thank him enough for all the memories? No, that's not how he feels. I think he feels of Curtis as a gatekeeper with a bad attitude that he's kept around for a long time because he's got real skills and he wins real fights. And he's a guy that says yes to every opportunity. But the truth is, he's been loved by the betting market, loved by the betting public. And it's cost them a lot of money, right? They've bet this guy to a favorite multiple times against Francis Ngannou, flattened both times. Bet him to a favorite against a lot of these guys that he's lost to, right? So I do believe Blades weighed in at 257, Almeida 241, heaviest since signing to the UFC. I feel the addition of weight for Almeida affects the cardio here. I mean, he added more weight. The second heaviest he's ever weighed in the UFC was against Derek Lewis. Did he look like he was having cardio problems there? I didn't think so. So when I look at this fight, I say to myself, who's the better grappler? For me, for my money, I've watched this guy in gi matches at the black belt level at the IBJJFs look fine, right? Look very competent, win matches, pass the guard, take people down. That's really hard to do. I don't think Curtis Blades is going to go out there and win the IBJJFs. I don't think he's going to go out there and compete with those guys at black belt level. I think he might get subbed at a local black belt tournament. That's the God's honest truth. So when I'm looking at that and I'm saying this guy is calling himself the best grappler in the division, I don't think he is. And I think that the idea of him calling himself the best grappler that wants to go out there and sprawl and brawl to keep this fight upright, it's like, well, are you the best grappler or aren't you? You're saying you're the best grappler, but I don't want to grapple with him. I want to sprawl and brawl and keep it upright. Okay, that doesn't sound like a vote of confidence for me. I watched this guy training at B-Team, right? Good jiu-jitsu. Nicky Rodriguez, world class. Take nothing away from the fact he's getting submitted there. But why are you going both hands flat on the mat like you're a wrestler still, right? Like we're talking about a guy who's starting going from the back, and he's got both hands flat on the ground like he's not worried that the guy's going to try and choke him. Like
that is why he deserved all the criticism. That is why he deserved the criticism for the Lewis fight. He was literally on top in guard, both hands posted on the mat, and not even trying to do a damn thing. Literally was just like, how much time? 4 minutes left. All right, 4 minutes. We're sitting like this, and just time would go by. It was unbelievable to watch.
Dude, honestly, though, I just think of Curtis Blades as one of the more overrated fighters in the UFC. Last time out, I thought
he's a self-sabotager
matchup against Sergey Pavlovich. I thought that was frankly, a fight he needed to win at this point in his career. Didn't win it. The guy's talking about, I still got 5-6 years to figure it out. God bless. I don't think Jailton Almeida's waiting 5 or 6 years to figure this out.
Blades is a self-sabotager is the problem. He's one of those guys, like you say, it's not just that he shoots himself in the foot, it's that he's so quick at reloading over and over and over. It's like he goes out there, he makes the mistake in the first couple of minutes where he almost gets tagged. You're like, okay, dude, you're not a pro boxer. Look what just happened to Francis Ngannou tonight. Like, you're an MMA fighter, a wrestler. Go out there and wrestle the boxer. And this dude would get caught and then not, get knocked out. And you're like, okay, he's going to learn his lesson, right? No, he doesn't. He just keeps striking and then he gets knocked out. It's just... there's fighters who you watch them on the rise, and it's like, okay, this guy made a bad fight IQ error, but then he learned from it, and it's not really a concern anymore. Then there's fighters who just they keep doing it, and they lose as a result. They have tough fights as a result. Like, there's multiple instances where they should have learned their lesson, and they just don't. If Curtis Blades was ever going to learn his lesson about his fight IQ, it would have happened by now. I remember going into that Pavlovich fight, I had said, like, this is like the time to basically shit or get off the pot. Either this dude is going to fight smart or he is not. This is the clearest striker versus grappler matchup he's ever going to be in the UFC. If he goes out there and tries to strike with this man, I'm never trusting this dude ever versus anybody ever again. What did he do? He tried to strike with the dude and gets clobbered. It's just like, I'm done with the dude. Like, I'm sorry. The guy is a great wrestler on paper, phenomenal ground and pound at times when he gets on top, limited boxing, which is fine. He can use it as a means to an end to get the takedown, but he doesn't. He uses his striking as the end. He just wants to be a boxer. He's one of those guys who just wants to box. You'll hear him in interviews talking about, oh, I'm such a great boxer. I really am going to go show out. I've really been improving my hands. It's just like, dude, you're fighting top contenders in title shot situations. Now's not the time to go and work on your striking like you're facing some bum on the prelims. So with Curtis Blades here, like, I think on paper, stylistically, he actually has skills to beat Jailton Almeida. Better wrestler on paper. Maybe he actually could do something with the striking here, but as some of the comments had said, Jailton's going to go out there with a game plan and he's going to stick to it. And as you and I talk about, bet on fighters who want to win as much as you want them to win, and also bet on fighters who are going to actually fight smart and stick to a game plan. Curtis Blades, I'm sure he wants to win, but he certainly doesn't fight like it, and he doesn't follow a game plan. So for me, I see the stylistic possibilities for him, but he's never a guy who's ever getting my money again. Basically, like any matchup.
And let me ask you this, Luca. Are we sure he's a better wrestler? That's what people keep saying, but
that's
he
true
tried
too.
to take down Derek Lewis and he failed and got knocked the hell out. Jailton tried to take him down and took him down a billion times
effortlessly. And on the Lewis note, something I pointed about with Curtis Blades, he will be very predictable in terms of his takedown feints. Even Lewis pointed out he basically sold the blueprint right out there in the post fight on Blades. He said, I saw him kept ducking for that side over and over again with the feint on the takedown. So I just waited for him to actually shoot the takedown, and then I went for it. And literally, that's how the fight went. Curtis Blades would shoot the same head outside takedown, and every time he would feint, he would also feint with that same takedown, but then he wouldn't do anything on top of it. So it's not like he was feinting the takedown to get Lewis to react and then following up with a strike to catch him with his hands down, or feinting one takedown and switching to another. He was literally preparing Lewis. It's almost like with a little kid, like, hey, on the count of 3, I'm going to throw the ball. Do you ready? 1, 2, 3. Like, that's what the uppercut was. He was literally like, 1, 2, all right, here's the takedown, 3. And then Lewis was just like, okay. Like, it was like the dumbest thing I've ever seen from like a high-level fighter in that situation. Like you could not like do something more to set up yourself to be countered on a silver platter going for the takedown. So I mean, this is just who Derek.
How about their other common opponent, Jairzinho Rosenstrike? One guy fought him, dominated him in the first round, took him down, passed his guard, and finished him on the ground. The other guy ended the fight with a giant, big old swollen eye and looked like he had a really hard time and had to fight him for the whole 15 minutes.
Yeah, so as Matt points out here, yeah, Blade's the more accomplished wrestler, but doesn't mean he's the more effective one when they actually step in the cage. And again, more so than that, maybe he shoots a takedown, it's a half-hearted one, doesn't work, and then he's like, all right, it's going to be a boxer. Or maybe he just wants to box the whole time here. Like, the smartest thing for Blades is to go out there, throw some feints, throw a couple of punches, shoot the takedown, get on top, and ground and pound the jiu-jitsu guy into oblivion. You very rarely see heavyweight submissions off of their backs. You rarely see that in MMA in general in the modern times, but especially in heavyweight division. It's so rare to get a sub off your back because they're just so big. I'm a heavyweight. I know what it's like to grapple with heavyweights. They can't move off of their backs like lighter fighters can. Rotating the hips, just moving off of their backs in any capacity, it's so much more difficult for them versus a lighter weight fighter. And so, not to say that Almeida can't get the sub off of his back, but that's the best path to victory for Blades. Do I have any faith in this man to do that? I have none, literally none. He might, but I don't have faith. So from a betting perspective, I feel like it's stylistically, I can see the advantages for Blades, but I just has to be Almeida or pass because it's Curtis Blades. Kind of turned that into a Blades versus Almeida breakdown. Really wanted to talk about the official bets for this week, but aside from that, what are your thoughts on the official betting slate this week?
Yeah, I just wanted to bring that one up because I think that that's a worthwhile fight, right? Like a main card quality fight. And I also just think that from a betting standpoint, there's a lot of lines that are starting to move now. One thing I take pride on, whether I win or lose my bets, I typically get the best of the number. And also that's part of a long-term winning strategy, right? Trying to time when you should get into the market. So I think that one of the things we do well as a service is we've had times where we're on different sides of a bet, right? There's other handicappers on the service, but we always are getting best of the numbers.
Yeah,
basically
we have a middle when that happens.
Direction. So yeah, that's the kind of thing that sharp bettors will be on different sides of bets at times, but it's about getting the best of the number. It's about having a good strategy. And I think we've done a good job analyzing the market in recent weeks. Shout out to everybody who supported us and rocked with us on the Zahabi pick last week. He's 36 years old. How is he going to do it? Guys, it's a fight. Okay. So at the end of the day, break down the fight for what it is each and every time. 14-0 doesn't mean he's going to be 15-0 just because somebody said so, just because everybody else is betting on it. It doesn't mean it's right. So every time, take the fights as they are. I think we've got another great slate, a lot of competitive lines. Let's find our winners.
And just to be clear, you said we in terms of that Zahabi pick. There was no we. That was 100% you. You deserve full credit. That was all you, plus 600 underdog. Very nice job there. And yeah, in terms of the closing line value, Topuria is a good example. You and I both liked Topuria. There was actually 2 bets that you posted on him at like plus 130 and plus 150-ish. And then the other handicapper ended up Once it got to a pick'em, he ended up betting on Volkanovski. So we had more on Topuria, so it was good anyways. But that's a perfect example where you and I both said when we did our breakdown earlier when he was still a good underdog, we said this line actually probably should be around a pick'em. So even when we have been on opposite sides, which is going to happen sometimes, but it's rare, we've always ended up middling the books rather than them middling us. So definitely been good time for the service. Only 7 losing weeks over the last 7 months. Hopefully another winning week in the books here, only averaging 1 losing week per month, obviously, as I just said. So hopefully we have a nice stretch here of cards and it turns to a nice stretch of results as well. So patreon.com/Fury's Fight Picks in the betting tier for those. But moving on to the co-main event, another fantastic fight here. Also a 5-rounder, despite the fact that it is not a title fight. We have Dustin Poirier taking on Benoit Saint Denis. As for the betting odds, Poirier right now is the underdog plus 180, Benoit Saint Denis minus 220. So clearly a big difference in terms of experience, name value, all of that. And yet the guy with all that in his favor is not the favorite. So curious your thoughts on this one. Do you think it is justified to have the much less proven fighter here as a somewhat significant favorite?
This is a line where I wouldn't play it right now, but I do understand why it moved in this direction. Early numbers, I think Benoit Saint Denis was the side, and I can explain why. I think he's a real problem for almost anybody, right? Like when you talk about people you don't want to fight, Luca, some of the things we brought up in these other fights are guys that stick to a game plan, guys that are really tough, guys that aren't going to quit on you, guys that are going to fight hard for your money. And I think when you're looking at a guy like Benoit Saint Denis, he fits all those boxes for me, right? Like if I'm talking about like, all right, Liam, you got to go out there and pick one of these UFC guys to fight. He's going to be like the bottom of my list, right? And the reason being is he doesn't seem like a guy who's going to quit under any circumstance. I faded him, man. I faded him the first time he got to the UFC. I was like, 8-0 on the French regional scene. God bless your heart. This is not going to work out against Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos, who people tried to tell me was a bum, right, in a recent fight that he had. And I'm like, you guys do understand that this is a guy that's spinning head kick, the last middleweight champion of the world. Mm-hmm. Okay. But
dos Santos is old now, and so people confuse that for him being a bum.
And even still, by the way, you remember that last fight he had that went to a draw as a plus, 320 or whatever underdog?
Fought his heart out.
Like, yeah, that guy is a damn savage, and he almost killed Renat Fakhreddin off the hype train of the most recent past with shots in the third round. He almost killed the man. Like, let's just be serious. Like, this is a serious fighter. So yeah, he's old. It doesn't matter a damn. And when you're looking at a guy, like Dustin Poirier, I think the same thing can be said, right? He's a little bit old. He's a little bit on the wrong side of his career, but I don't know that matters. He's still a tough guy. He's still going to go out there and fight hard. But the difference is, right? How many times has he poured out the jug at the altar of athletic glory? Dan Hooker has this man on like life support in the middle of the second round.
2-0. He was up 2-0. Hooker was up 2-0. It was cardio that lost that fight for Hooker.
Where he's like, I'm gonna push. I'm gonna find a way to win. I'm gonna dig deep right now. He's got hands on the knees, deep breaths, and he was like, you know what? I'm not losing this fight, right? How many times can you do that? How many times can you find that second gear, right? Because we know Benoit Saint Denis had to do it one time, right? Somebody put him on the brink of destruction. My man is out on his feet, just like covering up, but he never quit. Right. And I thought the referee should have done him a favor, like, hey, brother, let's get you out of here.
I thought that was getting stopped multiple times. I thought that was multiple stoppages. Yeah.
He does it, right? Like that guy's pulled from the event, Visliab, Kisliev, or whatever. I've seen videos of Islam Makhachev sitting in mount just beating a dude to the living death and then had to armbar him so the guy would stop the fight. Like that guy is not about stopping fights. But when you look at Benoit Saint Denis, neither is he. And by the way, if you remember, Luca, we just talked about what Elizeu Zaleski was doing late in that fight, round 3, right, against Renat. What was he doing in round 3 against Benoit Saint Denis? He was wilting. He was falling apart because Benoit Saint Denis refused to die. And he's like, I'm going to keep trying to take you down. I'm going to keep trying to punch you in the face. I don't care that I was dead before. Like this guy just found another way to keep pushing. And he's 28 years of age. So I think he could do that again. He's a soldier. I think he could find a reserve in his mind. I think he can get damn focused on the task. Dustin Poirier is a millionaire, guys. He's not a soldier. He's a fighter. He's done it 20 years, and he's starting to see the end. He's telling you that in the interview. He's saying, hey, man, like, I see a lot of my friends. They're broke. They're broken. I'm just thankful that I've made all this money, that I have this life for myself, for my family. Do you think he wants to spend it, not remembering his name, not remembering his kids? The truth is no. And he even said recently, every fight could be my last.
Yeah, he even said recently. even said recently, like every time I fight in there, I leave a piece of myself. How many times can I keep leaving pieces of myself? Like how much is left of me or something? Like he's basically telling you like, at the end, I'm already considered like. I'll let you continue breaking here, but this feels like a situation. If he gets flatlined again, it might be it was his retirement, to be honest.
I have felt the exact same way. I'm hearing what sounds a lot like retirement talk to me. And here's the other thing, Luca. We know by and large in this game, father time is unforgiving, right? You come back 6 months later after you just got your head punted into the third row. Maybe you look great. Maybe you look like the exact same guy, or maybe you don't, right? Maybe you look like a shell of yourself. We know that he used to be able to dig deeper than Justin Gaethje. How do we know? We saw the fight. They went out there. They scrapped. By the way, Justin Gaethje kicked his ass the first time, kicked his leg off, beat him up. But he was able to find that second gear. He was able to dig deeper. He was able to keep pushing. He did the same thing against Chandler because he was getting his ass whooped. He was getting out wrestled. He was getting out grappled. He was getting slammed all over. He's cheating, pulling his face all over, every which way but loose, fingers in the eyes, everything, scumbag. But then what happened? He found a way to dig deep. Can he keep doing it? The odds, I think, would suggest no, right? I think the market is telling you no. I think that Dustin is telling you no. But maybe he springs the upset here. All I could do is take my hat off to him. But the data, the evidence says he shouldn't be able to, right? And this guy, Benoit Saint Denis, can kick you in the body very hard. I listened to Demetrius Johnson talk about his game. He was super impressed. He's like, I've never seen this guy fight before, but he's brilliant. He's taken every free body kicking he can get, trying to hurt this guy. Bonfimi absolutely sent him to the shadow realm, right? Plus 250 underdog. That was the last time you saw him as a dog. Minus 113 against Thiago Moises, a young guy, a guy who wanted it real bad, right? A jiu-jitsu world champion. He had nothing for him. He beat him up. He took him down. When he got taken down, he got back up. He got back in his face. He never lets you off the hook. If you remember, Luca, what's the most standout moment of the Dustin Poirier and Khabib fight besides the guillotine attempt and besides him getting finished? It's, I can't get this guy off of me. That's what he says to his corner after like one round against Khabib, right? Khabib's a problem. He gets on top of everybody. He grabs a hold of everybody. But that attitude, that feeling is what has done in Dustin Poirier a billion times, right? Charles Oliveira was not having much success early on. He's getting beat up a little bit by the guy who was a little faster, a little bit more technical with the hands. But the quitter Charles Oliveira that everybody told me about goes out there and knees him in the body a few times and made him start second guessing. How much do I really
Poirier wilted there. Poirier wilted there.
And then he took his back and then he finished him. And by the way, I had the plus 300 on the submission that night. I had Charles Oliveira inside the distance. I've made 15 units or so fading Dustin Poirier. I've never bet on the man one time in my life. So have I lost money as well? Yeah, I tried to bet Conor McGregor. I'm an Irishman, okay? Plus 115 on the Irish legend. I'm taking that. But when you look, right, those are the times that I've been wrong on Dustin Poirier. I've been right more than I've been wrong. I made 15 units of profit taking the unders and taking guys to beat this man. And by the way, I also had the ends by sub in the Chandler fight. I had 5 units on Michael Chandler. I had Chandler by sub plus 1,100. Yeah, they didn't all cash, but I'll tell you what, people were scared that laid the minus 250 on Poirier. Everybody thought they had it all figured out. And then Michael Chandler, the Bellator washout, the guy who's like 1-3 in the UFC, had this guy almost out of there several times. He had him in terrible situations. And I said on Twitter this week, he fumbled. He had every opportunity you could ask for. He had every position you could ask for in fighting. He couldn't beat him because he didn't have the skills and the requisite ability to dig deep himself. He's in his mid-30s. Dustin Poirier has not beaten a fighter in their 20s since Max Holloway. That's a featherweight. So if he can do it this time, I'll say God bless him. Benoit Saint Denis looks like he's twice his size. They're facing off next to each other. He's fucking 3 inches, 4
his
inches,
head
5
even
inches
his
taller.
head looked like a different weight class. Like it looked like a light heavyweight versus a lightweight. Like he's just a bigger person.
Yeah, and I think that he's going to try and mix in different kicks. I think he's going to try and take him down. I think he can wrist ride him and beat him up. I think he can take his back and mug him. I think he has more paths to a victory here. And if Dustin Poirier at his age is able to find rounds 3, 4, and 5, like people are telling me, then I just have to say hats off to him and God bless him. I don't see that. I think he's going to wilt under the pressure. I think he's going to get beat up, and I think he's going to get finished. In terms of the staff rumor, why don't you go ahead and address that, Luca?
Actually, I know me and Liam actually talked a bit about this off air, so I know we're on the same page. Both of us have actually had staff in the past, so it definitely looks like staff. Like for sure, that looks like staff on Benoit's forehead. If you're unfamiliar, there were some pictures came out. I think it was the official like new profile picture or something for the UFC. It was like a very clear HD picture, and you can see like on his forehead up in the corner, there's a little crater. So when you have staff, if you're unfamiliar, if you've never had it before, It starts out like a sore where it's just kind of like, oh, my dog gotta be the center of attention at all times. It starts out kind of like a sore that's like active and there's like fluid and stuff. But then once you're actually over it, once it's in like the healing stage where like the virus is kind of leaving your body and you just have like the lingering sort of sore left over, it turns into the crater that Benoit has now. So he definitely had staph, no doubt about it. But it looks like he had it at some point in the past, and now he is at least mostly healed from it. Now, depending how bad he has it, that can lead to potentially issues even after it heals. Like I had it for 2 years before because it was misdiagnosed, and at that point, like it ruined me. I was terrible. I couldn't do anything athletic. But then I actually got it a second time since then, knew exactly what it was on top of it right away, and I had basically almost no issues. It was like I had a cold for a week essentially. So depending how quickly he got on it and everything, it's not too much of a concern. When it's more of a concern is when you see them with like an active sore. Like Liam and I were talking about pre-show here, when Kevin Lee fought and he had like a golf ball sized active staph infection on his chest. That's a little bit different. So this to me seemed like it was basically just like the crater scab that kind of happens afterwards, and that crater will just kind of get smaller and smaller over time, even though it's not causing you any issues. So Liam and I both have had staph, familiar with it. We're not doctors, but from our opinions at least, not too concerned about it, although there's some concern given the fact that, he did potentially, or obviously did have staph sometime during his camp. It's just not enough to shift our opinion in terms of betting or the line or anything like that. In terms of my thoughts on the matchup, for starters, in terms of the line here, 220 minus 220 for Benoit Saint Denis seems like the most blatant trap line like I've seen in a while. This seems like it is absolutely designed to get the more casual people on a big UFC 299 card to go, Dustin Poirier plus 180 versus who's this guy I've never heard of? What? And believe me, that sounds like just some like surface level BS analysis. That's a tactic the books do because there are a bunch of jackasses who will line up to the window when they see a known popular fighter as an underdog against someone they have never heard of. And make no mistake about it, you being a hardcore fan out there listening, sure, you've heard of Benoit Saint Denis. A lot of people have not. A lot of the casuals who are going to turn into a big pay-per-view event like this, they don't know who that is, or maybe they have a very cursory knowledge of him, and they're just going, Poirier plus 180, and it's not a Khabib or something. They're running to the window. So to me, this seems like such a trap line. Do I think that Benoit should be minus 220? No, that seems a bit high, but I don't think the books mind it being high because I think they are thinking Poirier is going to lose, and they just want people to pile the money on him. So in terms of the betting perspective, it seems like a trap line. I don't really like the value on Benoit at this point, even though I think he is going to win. If you got in on him earlier, I think that was a good play, though. In terms of my play, Poirier, he's going to be 36 this year. He has a ton of damage. He's coming off of a knockout loss. We talk about with Volkanovski, these guys in the lighter weight divisions, once you hit that mid-30 points, you basically don't win fights against high-level opponents anymore. It's very, very rare, especially title fights. And obviously, it's not a title fight, but it's a 5-rounder against another top lightweight. You got to point out that Poirier is a kind of an ancient lightweight in terms of his age now, and not just in terms of real age, but also fight years. I broke down back in, I think it was 2010 or 2011. I was doing live radio for Sherdog back in the day there, and I broke down Poirier's WEC debut against Danny Castillo. I actually picked him there to get the upset. He ultimately lost a close decision, but he did well for himself, and people saw that, like, this guy's actually a real prospect. I was very high on him before that fight. That's why I picked him for the upset, even though he obviously didn't get it. So I've been following this man's career forever, basically the entire time that I've been betting. It's been well over a decade, and his fight career has not been easy. It has been wars. Like Liam mentioned, all these times he's had to dig deep, and that has basically been the reason he won those fights. Dan Hooker had him kind of dead to rights, 2-0 in rounds, clear for Hooker. Hooker gassed, and Poirier won the last 3 rounds, won a decision 3-2. Like that was, he was dead to rights. He was almost finished at the end of, I think it was the second round there as well. He was saved by the bell. So if Poirier can't dig deep, like again, the Oliveira fight, like the Khabib fight, he tends to not do well. Usually his fights are him kind of getting his ass kicked at points, digging deep and going on to win. Mid-level or middle age now, and for the 30s, 35 years old, going on 36, coming off the KO loss. I just don't have that much faith in him to be able to dig deep anymore. I think this might go like some of his recent fights, where it's a war, it's a firefight. He starts to struggle, and there's just not that rebound anymore. And that is something you will see with fighters on the decline. They just lose that resiliency. They lose that ability to fight back. Sometimes it's physical, but also sometimes it's mental as well. So for me, Poirier, love the dude, watching him fight and everything. Used to DM with him on Twitter. Used to actually tail my betting service back in the day. I have absolutely nothing bad to say about this man, but I never let bias cloud my judgment. And based on what we've seen from him recently, based on the historic trends in terms of age, KO losses, all of that stuff, that already makes me so concerned about him. And then he's going against a guy like Benoit Saint-Denis, who, as we talked about, resilient as they come, will not quit, gets into an absolute firefight, can absolutely deliver everything you deliver to him, and then some. This is just the type of guy who probably is going to be the one who goes out there and puts a firefight in Poirier. He can last, but Poirier can't. So for me, I got to go with Benoit Saint-Denis, probably honestly by stoppage along the way at some point. Do you have anything to add, Liam?
No, man, I tend to agree there. I think he's probably going to get this done inside the distance. I think that's better for him as well to try and push it to end inside the distance. Listen, 5 rounds, you can go figure out that experience with somebody else. I don't think you want to do that with Dustin Poirier because he'll still take some damage along the way, man. The guy throws hard, he hits hard, he can box. So I think for Benoit Saint-Denis, he's going to want to take him down to the ground as much as possible, beat him up as much as possible. But I truly think that Dustin Poirier never saw that head kick coming, and that's the way I see it ending again on Saturday night. I think Benoit Saint-Denis is very clever with his mix-ups from that body kick to that head kick. I don't think Bonfim saw a lot of the head kicks coming, and I do think that he had a lot of good skills to offer in that fight, but he got overwhelmed too quickly, and I think that's what's going to happen to Dustin as well.
Yeah, and honestly, one thing I'm concerned about is you'll see guys like a Poirier coming off the KO loss where, they're normally very resilient. This might be the case where he gets like dusted in 60 seconds. That will happen with these guys at the tail end of their career. Like they're durable, they're resilient, they're having these back and forth battles. Then their chin goes, they get flatlined like he did against Chandler, and it goes. So I'm not saying I expect that, but normally that's never really a thought process for a Poirier fight. It might just get flatlined with the first big shot. He might actually hear that. That would not surprise me. So I think people really should be very concerned about his age, the damage, and the KO loss. And it wasn't that long ago either. But moving on to the next bout. Interesting one here. A couple of fighters who, on paper, should make for a very fun one, but at least as I'll get into, I'm not so certain that will be the case. We have Kevin Holland taking on Michael Page. Page finally making his UFC debut after fighting in Bellator for seemingly an eternity versus janitors and the like. Finally getting to see him take on the UFC competition, but unfortunately, speaking of age, he's now 36 years old himself. In terms of the betting odds, pretty close one here. Holland, the slight favorite, minus 135. Comeback on Page is plus 115. Here's your thoughts, Liam, not only on this fight, but the future for MVP in the UFC.
I have no idea what to make of this fight, Lucas, so I won't spend too much time breaking it down. The truth is, I ended up picking MVP by split decision here. And the reason being, I think by KO1 or split decision. I think that was my official article pick. And the reason being is because I do think he's a guy with dynamic offense. I think he's very clever, right? I don't think he's fought the best level of competition, but he trains with Team Renegade, Leon Edwards, high-level guys, right? So I do think he has good experience, but I also think at 36 years of age, to your point, he doesn't seem like he has quite the same physicality as Kevin Holland. So I don't know that a longer fight benefits him. I think he might come out here and try and go crazy on him early because I do think Kevin is a little bit stuck in the mud at times. Like we see Kevin, he goes out there against a guy like JDM, had a pretty decent fight, right? But then you also see him go out there against guys that are 40-year-old shells of themselves, like Wonderboy Thompson. No disrespect, but that's a guy he should have dominated and beat and frankly finished in the first or second round. And what ended up happening there instead? He ended up letting his friend off the hook several times, let him back up off the ground, didn't follow him to the ground when he dropped him, hurt him on the feet and didn't follow up. And when I saw him do that, that was when I was done betting on Kevin Holland, guys. I don't know if that's him throwing fights. I don't know if that's him being, just like lackadaisical. That's not a guy I'm going to part ways with my money on because what do we always say? I can't want it more than you do. I can't want you to do something, have a more logical game plan for your fights than you do because you're a professional. And I think Kevin is a guy with real skills, but I don't think that he's a guy that goes out there and maximizes his tools. I actually think he's less than the sum of his parts. He's a BJJ black belt that only submits guys that want to grapple with him. Like, unless you insist on grappling with Kevin, he normally will not force that element into a fight. And by the way, the times that he has, it's been inopportune. He tried to force grappling against Brendan Allen, got submitted in the second round after dominating round one. So you look at this guy, and he goes out there against Darren Stewart, I think his name was. No longer with the company, by the way. He went out there, and he's like a minus 250, minus 300 favorite, whatever it was. he is going for takedowns. He ends up gassing out in that fight, and Darren Stewart gives him a real scare later on in the fight. He got submitted by Dawkins in a fight where there was a head clash. I had Dawkins money line and ITD. They wouldn't pay me because this guy got clashed on the head. But that's one time he got flash knocked out in the UFC and finished. Another time he got basically like a broken hand and a broken ego against Wonderboy, and he quit. So it's like, this is a guy who is durable, who does have skills, but he is not fighting optimally, and he hasn't been for years. I've made almost 20 units of profit on Kevin Holland fights, Luca, and I feel like I don't know this guy anymore. I feel like I don't know what to expect from him anymore. I thought he was going to go out there and give Chimaev a fight. I know that sounds stupid now, because this is a guy who is a black belt and has been for a long time. This is a guy who is long, awkward, tricky, can scramble a little bit. But what happened? He could scramble there with Chimaev for a minute and a half, and then he just ran out of ideas and gave up. And like, frankly, I'm done with you. So if Kevin goes out there and gets a big win, I'll celebrate him. I'll say, hey, man, great job. I'm still not going to bet on him in his next fight, because he'll do something stupid again. That's the only thing that's been guaranteed his whole career, is that the next thing he'll do is something dumber than the last. So when I look at this guy who should have been submitted by the Derek Brunsons of the division up at 185, then he comes down to 170 and he's still effing about and not taking it all that serious. I don't know what to expect from this guy, but I'm not parting ways with my money on him ever again. Not at chalk. I'll tell you that. If he's plus 300, okay, let's figure it out. Maybe there's a time where it makes sense logically to get involved. But I'm now being asked to pay for the privilege to bet on Kevin Holland. Not the way I make money in this business.
Yeah, to me, this is a fight between two absolute fades. So in the case of MVP, I followed this dude's career since the beginning in MMA. Back in 2012, he made his MMA debut after fighting in kickboxing, and that. In his debut, he landed a tornado kick KO. That clip went viral back at the time. Well, I mean, not truly viral like it would now, where now viral clips actually like reach outside the MMA bubble. This was viral only in MMA, which wasn't, that big of a bubble back then. But if you were a hardcore MMA fan, you might have seen that clip. For me, I was like, wow, a tornado kick in MMA, that's basically unheard of. And so I sought out who it was and then followed his career literally ever since then, ever since his first fight. He fought on some regional circuits in London, fought around kind of internationally, and then eventually went over to Bellator. I was so excited for this dude to come over to Bellator because not only has he showed to be a good kickboxer, his kickboxing had translated into MMA, he was doing flashy, wild stuff, he liked to do some showboating. He seemed like a guy who might not just go on to be something good. Like, I wasn't like, thinking, oh man, this guy's going to be one of the best ever or anything. He seemed like he'd at least be a good fighter though, but more importantly, do some flashy, cool stuff like Anderson Silva when he brought the front kick, the teep to MMA. That wasn't really a thing before Anderson Silva and Lyoto Machida started doing it to people. So I thought maybe he could do some stuff like that, do some flashy things that would then become sort of a normal thing. This dude turned out to be a total fraud. Like, he had some of the worst fights you'll ever see, unless he was facing like literal janitors who, yeah, he could put on some flashy KOs. Against anyone remotely decent, he would do everything in his power to avoid the fight, circle, showboat, dance. Like, instead of throwing strikes, he would showboat and dance, and that's how he would win rounds. Some of the most brutal, miserable, soul-sucking type of performances to watch consistently from this man. So in terms of being any kind of elite fighter, I am so far off that boat. And the reason why I wanted to start off with, the positive things is because I don't want to sound like just a straight up hater in terms of criticizing him. Because again, the reason why I'm so critical of him is because I had higher hopes for him at one point, and he just has turned out to be such a letdown. So against the lower level Bellator fighters, and as a younger age, he couldn't get the job done in a consistent or impressive manner. I know he only has a couple losses, but he just looked so bad in most of his fights, and they basically had him avoid anyone decent. So now coming to the UFC, 36 years old, I have no faith in this man to go out there and string together any kind of decent string of fights, 5 KOs or something and earn a title shot. I think we're probably going to see a bunch of jackassery. Go ahead, Liam.
I got to give him the one feather in his cap. If you look at the stats, Luca, the stat about being over 35 years of age in a title fight, right? Nobody's winning, right? If you look 155 and below. But there was one man. Yep. His name was Tyron Woodley. He had the weirdest path to the title. He basically an ACL injury to Carlos Condit is what locked this man in for a title shot. And then he knocked Robbie Lawler the hell out. It's one of the most shocking outcomes I feel in MMA history. I never saw that coming. Robbie had been on the back of 2 fight of the year. So there's the credence you give there. But then he turned away Darren Till. He did defend the title against Wonderboy and these guys. So Tyron Woodley at 170 pounds, 36 years of age. I think when he won the title, defended it, I think, till 37. That's the only guy who's ever done it. and MVP is in the right weight class. If he's going to get it done, welterweight has been the one that's a little bit weaker. And by the way, I think of the UFC's business interest here, right, Luca? Number one, this guy MVP, 21-2. So yes, boring as shit sometimes. I'll grant that. Goes out there with weird game plans sometimes, no doubt. Although it was Paul Daly who came out a wrestler. Don't forget. Paul Daly was like, let's stand and bang. Just shooting takedowns right off the rip, right? But when you look at MVP, 21-2, that's a guy who cares about winning and losing, right? Whether he's like the best guy or the worst, he cares about winning and losing. You don't get that record by accident. Kevin Holland, 25-10. Very indifferent about winning and losing. And for me, that's the difference between these two guys. I think if there was a guy who's going to try and figure out a way to win, it's MVP. And I think the guy who could find a way to lose is Kevin Holland. So that I do agree with you in all aspects of the breakdown, but I just feel that that's the X factor here. It's like one guy finds a way to win and one guy finds a way to lose. And I don't think Kevin Holland is next for a title shot if he wins 2, 3, 5 more in a row, because he's not that reliable. But when you look at a guy like this in MVP, I think he's a professional. I think he's going to show up and do everything they ask. And if he can get this win, one more win, I do think Leon against MVP in England does business. So I think at the end of the day, Dana White didn't care if you say Bellator who? He's putting Michael Chandler in a lot of big fights because he wants him to lose. So if they want Leon to keep the strap, then maybe they try and sign up MVP for a title shot. Hey, boys, I know your teammates, whatever. We'll have him move to the States. No problem.
And do that fight in London, too. Do it in England somewhere. And obviously, that'd be a big hit over there. And the thing is, as I mentioned, I don't see MVP legitimately going on like a string of 5 impressive fights to earn a title shot. But like we talked about earlier in the Sean O'Malley fight, the UFC will absolutely put on the training wheels and hold your hand until you get to the title shot. So maybe he goes out there and wins this fight, and they give him some other relatively winnable fight that's, not super easy for him, but of some guy that they could justify him getting a title shot off of. Maybe they give him someone of that ilk, and then he gets a title fight, but then again, the training wheels are off, and he's just on his own. So in terms of actually being an elite level fighter, I have zero faith in this man to do that. Watched all of his fights in Bellator, and before that, like I said, I was very high on him at one point, just completely disappointed by him. So not to say he won't get a title shot if the UFC holds his hands, but I don't see him actually truly being an elite fighter worthy of that. In terms of this fight, if Kevin Holland has 2 functioning brain cells that can spark together, he's going to grapple here. He is not going to try to strike with him. Not to say that Holland can't strike, because again, MVP's been vulnerable on the feet. He got knocked out by Diego Lima. Granted, I know it was kind of a weird scramble on the ground that happened, but
greatest knockout of all time, in my view, from Bellator. That's the best knockout that ever happened, except for maybe Patchy Mix, Halfion Stotts.
I bet Lima there, and it was not going so great. It was one of these weird MVP fights where it was just kind of not a lot happening, doing his weird showboating, and then finally out of nowhere that happened, thankfully. But in this fight, like if Holland has any wits about him, he's going to shoot the takedown. But as you mentioned, multiple instances this man has shown to be not just a poor game planner, but almost to the point where it's like, are you just straight up like throwing the fight? Do you have like a gentleman's agreement? Like, what is going on here? So in terms of game plans, in terms of strategy, I would not be surprised at all if Holland goes out there and just tries to strike and basically does everything that MVP wants and allows him to showboat and basically just dance around, circle, not really do a whole lot, and end up winning an absolute snoozer of a decision. Because one thing about MVP, he has, now don't get me wrong, this is a very weird comparison to make in a way. He has some things about him that remind me of Floyd Mayweather. Not the fact that he's going to go 50-0 or something like that. Not the fact that he's going to be one of the greatest of all time. But the fact that Floyd Mayweather did not give an absolute damn if he put on the most boring fight you have ever been forced to suffer through, as long as he got the victory. MVP has that same mentality. The crowd will boo this man to the point where you can barely hear the commentators on the broadcast, and he will make 0 adjustments, not even a fake little flurry to get them to shut up. He will just let them boo and keep doing what he's doing. Kevin Holland, that's not the case. He wants to play it up for the fans. He wants to be good for Dana, get his bonuses, be a fan favorite. He's not about the win. He has a bunch of losses, as Liam mentioned. The way he fights is totally different, and so ultimately, for my prediction, I went with Holland based on the grappling, but I feel like this is going to be one where, like, 60 seconds into the fight, I'm going to be like, oh, this dude's not grappling. MVP is just going to dance his way to victory. So, for me, not one I am at all interested in from a betting perspective. From a picking perspective, I guess I'll go with Holland. But again, as we talked about, it's not just about predicting who's going to win based on the skill set. You have to talk about the mental aspect, the approach, the game planning, and skill wise, I think that Holland is at least as good of a fighter here. I think it's kind of a wash, if not maybe advantage to Holland. But in terms of the game plan, the strategy, the will to win, to put that over everything else, MVP has that and Holland doesn't. So very, very tough fight. Not one I'd recommend from a betting perspective. Hopefully it plays out in a fun manner, but I don't exactly have too much faith in that for the reasons I stated. Moving on to the next bout on the card, second one of the main card. Another very good one here. Again, top to bottom, this is a fantastic event. We have Jack Della Maddalena taking on Gilbert Burns. As for the betting odds here, Della Maddalena is the favorite, currently sitting at minus 155. Comeback on Burns is plus 130. Another kind of a measuring stick matchup here. Curious which side you are taking, Liam.
I think that like three fights in a row basically to start this main card are really difficult to predict. But with that being said, I feel a lot better. And I know that this could age poorly, right? I'm just going to acknowledge that up front. But I feel better about JDM as a pick, excuse me, than some of these other guys. The only reason I say that is because I have had a pretty decent read on JDM since he got to the UFC. I bet Angelusa on the Contender Series plus 130, and then I never tried to fade this guy again. I did tell everybody, don't lay minus 400, minus 500 against Basso Hafez. The reason being, I thought Basso Hafez was a terrible matchup for him. Guy who's going to shoot a ton of takedowns, guy who's jacked beyond belief, guy who's really strong physically. And I just thought that was not a great matchup for Jack because Jack wants to keep people away from him in box. And I just didn't think Basso Hafez was going to not agree to do that at all, right? I thought he was going to be very insistent on the wrestling. And he was. But he only got 3 takedowns in that fight. And the 3 takedowns he got were when Jack was like, let me go for a guillotine right now. Probably a mistake in hindsight, right? And I think that that's the kind of thing that a young fighter who's still relatively inexperienced in the UFC can learn from. You've seen this guy go out there against different styles now and find ways to win. And I think that that's important, right? Basso Hafez is a guy who wants to wrestle, grapple, and be insistent about it. Kevin Holland's a guy who wants to keep it on the feet, strike with you. He was able to go out there and win both those fights. Were they close? Yes. Were they difficult? Yes. But they're also age contemporaries. They're guys that are the same age, have the same goals, same dreams. They're in the gym every day. They went out there and they tried to fight their fight, right? Kevin Holland, like we just acknowledged, he likes to fight on the feet. He prefers it, right? So he doesn't go out there and push some of his grappling skills. He wants to strike with you and see what's up. He tried that with Jack. It didn't work out for him. So Jack was a better striker. Okay. Then you look at the fight with Basso Hafez. He wanted to go out there and implement his game plan. Let me wrestle. Let me grapple. Let me get on top. He couldn't do it. So now my question is, what is the evidence that Gilbert Burns could do it? That he did it to George Masvidal, a guy who's clearly past his sell-by date, no longer competes in the sport? Maybe. I think that's a feather in his cap that he went out there and out-wrestled him. Did he submit him? No. Did he finish him? No. I actually think Colby Covington might have came closer to submitting him. God's honest truth. So that's a little bit of a concern for me, right? Who has he submitted at 170 that gives us a lot of faith and confidence in Gilbert Burns? His name is Neil Magny. I have said before, with all due respect and love, that in this welterweight division, among elite guys, Neil Magny is the biggest fish on the mat in the division. I thought Ian Gary could have submitted him. He decided to too late. I thought that, what's his name? Shavkat Rakhmonov, the greatest bet in the history of MMA, was Shavkat Rakhmonov by sub. I've used the word lock one time. I said Shavkat is going to take him down whenever he wants. He'll submit him whenever he wants. Took him down in the round 2, submitted him easily. Okay, Rafael Dos Anjos, guy who is known for being too small at 170 to grapple, right? At 155, he outgrappled a lot of people. He took him down to the ground in the first round, passed his guard easily, and submitted him in the first round. That's the truth. So RDA is not a guy who should be able to do that to you. How about the guy from, what's his name? Neto BJJ had a grappling match, not a fight, a grappling match with Neil Magny. He submitted him in 55 seconds with a guillotine choke. He competes at 155 in the UFC. Is he a ranked fighter? No, he's not. Okay, so these are the facts. That's the one guy he submitted in this weight class. Did he submit Wonderboy? No, he did not. Who came closer to finishing Wonderboy? Bilal Muhammad. That's a fact. Bilal, remember the no finishes Muhammad. One time he finished Sean Brady. I'm sorry, guys. I just don't see it. Can Gilbert punch with power? Yes, he can. So maybe he shocks the world and knocks out Jack Della. But Jack Della's got his nose on this side of his face, and he looks very unconcerned about that fact. The guy is a gangster. Okay, in my view, he's not afraid to fight anybody. He's not afraid to get in a scrap. And here's the other thing I've noticed about this guy. Angelusa had every position I wanted. He had him in the head and arm choke. He got him in these deep spots. So there's the credence for Gilbert, right? It's like Gilbert probably not going to let you off the hook if you make that mistake against him. But he's been there, he's done that, and he survived. He's not a quitter. Half these guys in MMA, you start wrapping something around their neck, they panic, they go, get me out of here, right? That's not what he did. He was in a tight choke. He's sitting there like, bro, the second you let go of this, I'm going to beat you up for trying this, man. I'm going to make you pay for this. And he got out, and then he beat the brakes off of Angelusa as soon as they got back to the feet. So I think Gilbert's got to come out here, take him down, and try and kill him. Because I think the longer this fight goes on, Jack Della is going to be trying to kill him from second one till the end. He's going to try and hurt him really bad with shots on the feet. And this is a guy that picks his shots well, whether that's shots to the body, whether that's shots upstairs with the hands. Against Basil Hafez, he would defend the takedown, hold your head down, and then knee you in the body. He's mean. He's a jerk, right? He's trying to hurt you out there. And the last time that Gilbert Burns fought a man from Australia, he got kneed in the face, he got knocked the hell out, and he got sent packing to a new weight class. So I just don't know that Gilbert Burns is as good as advertised. I think Gilbert's a great fighter, fun fighter, challenge for the title. But you look at the run and you go piece by piece. The only really good guy he ever outgrappled at 170 is Gunnar Nelson. And he didn't finish him. That was a black belt. That's like the only black belt he's ever summarily outgrappled at 170. I don't know, man. He's a guy that I think has relied on the fact that he could strike with guys that were a little bit older in the division. He had power. Damian Maia, great fighter. What is he going to do to him at 41 years of age? It was a tough matchup. And then he knocks him out, screams Poa 3 times. He's fighting for the title. But Kamaru Usman knocked him out with a jab in the third round. He's not the most powerful puncher in the division. So I truly believe that Jack Della could knock him out with a jab, could hurt him to the body. I think he could finish him. So I think Jack's going to win the fight. I think Gilbert's best chance to take him down, try and submit him as early as possible while he's as fresh as possible. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, I'm in agreement here. The thing with Burns, I don't want to call him overrated, but he is kind of overrated in a way. He's a very good fighter, well-rounded, talented, made some nice improvements, but in terms of where he stands in the division, I think some of the fights that you mentioned have given him a bit of an inflated stock. The Jorge Masvidal win, the Wonder Boy win, those were two guys clearly on the way out. It was very apparent when they were in the cage, they were just not their prime selves. So I think his stock has been inflated because of those, but I'm not trying to say he's a bad fighter by any means. I still think he's a very good, well-rounded technical fighter. The thing is, Jack Della Maddalena, yes, his takedown defense did not look great against Hafez, but that was a short notice matchup and a different style. So I've given the benefit of the doubt to an extent there. And Gilbert Burns has never been a strong wrestler outside of, again, like the Wonder Boy fight. Like he's just outside of the guys who are basically has-beens, he's just never really been a dominant force in the wrestling department. Early in his career outside the UFC, early in his career inside the UFC, it's just not been the case for Burns. So I don't think that Jack Della Maddalena is an elite takedown defender, but it's probably good enough to defend the takedowns from Burns. Burns is as good of a grappler as he is, and he can submit you on the ground. As you mentioned, doesn't get a lot of submissions, though. Usually he's more of a positional grappler, win the round, take your back. So even if Jack does get taken down, maybe loses a round, but probably is able to survive. On the feet, there's something about Jack's game that I think is going to line up very poorly for Gilbert Burns, and that is that Burns, as you mentioned, he got knocked out by a jab from Kamaru Usman. That's not the only time he's shown a poor chin. His fight earlier in his career was against Thiago Santos, where or not Thiago Santos, was it Cowboy Oliveira, I think? Right? Was it a second fight in the UFC, I think?
Let me pull it up because I know that he got knocked out by Dan Hooker, but that was at the end of his run at lightweight. I think he got hurt one time before that as well.
He won this fight. He ended up getting an armbar in round 3. I think it was against Cowboy Oliveira. You can find that.
Right. Dude, that fight so long ago, I forgot that fight happened. Well done.
Yeah, so at this point in time, he was hyped by the UFC and like fans. They were like, "Oh man, he's the next big thing." So I was watching him closely, like, "Is this the next big thing?" And I researched him going into that fight, and I was like, "Okay, he has potential." And I actually bet him in that fight. Eventually, he won, thankfully. Holy mother of God, he looked atrocious going every second of that fight. He got hit with a shot. I believe it might have actually broken his orbital and at least injured his face. You can see he was kind of swollen. And he basically just stopped actively fighting until he eventually got the armbar, and I think it was round 3, right? And that performance always stood out to me. Then the Kamaru Usman one, getting knocked out by the jabs. Like, when you have a guy who shows those kind of tendencies, that's not something that really changes throughout your career. Well, Jack Della Maddalena, he is a great pressure boxer. He doesn't just go out there and land a shot or two. He lands a flurry, and he gets in your face. Gilbert Burns does not like being pressured. He does not like getting hit. The combination of those two at once, I think this is a situation where not only is Burns at a high possibility to get knocked out here, I think it'd be kind of like the wilting kind of quit knockout where he gets rocked, just kind of turtles up, kind of goes to his knees, and basically the ref does a mercy stoppage. I think a legitimate KO is possible, but I also think there's a real shot of that. He doesn't like the pressure. He doesn't like the punching combinations, the flurries, and I think we could actually see a very real potential here for Gilbert to just wilt. I think the Kamaru Usman fight was that. You don't see guys get knocked out with jabs. He got hit with a jab, went to his knees, and just kind of like flopped around and gave up. I think we could see something like that. Doesn't get the takedown, getting boxed up, getting pressured, which is important. He's not having time to circle around, kind of regather his conscience. I think he's going to get pressured, and those flurries are going to keep coming more often and more often. I think eventually we see Gilbert Burns actually get starched here. That said, this is a measuring stick performance for Jack Della Maddalena. He has not fought a lot of good competition. This is the best fighter he's faced so far. It is a different style than what he's faced so far in terms of the well-rounded and technical aspects of Burns' game. So on one hand, based on the style, I like Jack a decent amount here. There's a little bit of pause that I have based on, again, I've been betting MMA for 14 years now. I've seen so many times like this where the prospect has all the things in his column in terms of the credentials, the skill set, the potential. Sometimes experience does matter. Guys just have poor aspects to their game that you would not expect, sometimes comically poor aspects to their game. So there's that kind of asterisk, that caveat there that I guess maybe Jack shows something really poor here. But based on what I've seen, I do have some concerns about Jack's game going forward. I also don't like, one thing I forgot to mention, his defensive boxing. It's straight up stand up like this, defend with your arms, and not even like a good, like really secure. He kind of just goes like this. And like you can punch him front, you can punch him on the top of the head. He literally just kind of goes like this and sits still. He doesn't move his feet. Like literally, you can just freeze frame it. He just goes like this, puts his hands on the side of his face, and does not move when guys throw punches at him. That's terrible striking defense. That will cost him one day. Probably not going to cost him against a Gilbert Burns. But anyone who has good counter striking or good precision offensive striking, pressure striking of their own, he's going to get carved up to the body and to the head with that striking defense style. So
and this one thing I'd say positive about Gilbert's striking is just that he's powerful, right? So he is a powerful guy. He can make you pay. Like Chimaev,
Jason
I don't think
Sago
expected that punch that hit him so hard. Like.
Yeah, knocked down Chimaev, knocked out Jason Sago back in the day at 155, I believe that was, near the end of his run before Hooker knocked him out, I think. I think that might have been like back-to-back fights or close to it. But yeah, so in terms of the striking defense, down the line, I think it's probably going to be an issue for Della Maddalena. In this fight, the way I could see it being an issue is if you're Gilbert Burns, if I'm working with Gilbert Burns, and I've worked with fighters before, I haven't in a bit now. Thanks, James Krause, for ruining any fighters ever working with sports bettors ever again. But when I used to work with fighters, I'd help them with game plans and stuff like that. If I was working with Gilbert Burns, the game plan would be so obvious of what to do. You throw strikes or feints, either or, to get Jack to go up and shell into this mode where he is standing straight up. His center of gravity is high. His feet are not wide apart. You get him to shell up like that, shoot the power double leg, try to scoop the legs out from under him. Even if that fails, try to spin behind the back. Jack does give that up sometimes in the standing position. That is by far the most obvious game plan to approach this with if you are Gilbert Burns. Does he do that? Time will tell. But if I was him, if I was working with his team, I would absolutely say that's the way to go. Personally, I think ultimately we're probably going to see Jack keep the fight on the feet for the most part. Maybe he gets taken down once, maybe loses a round, but I think we see at least 2 of the rounds on the feet. I think Jack, if it goes that long anyways, but I think at some point Jack probably actually starches him with a combination, whether it's a real KO or Gilbert wilting to the pressure. I think eventually Jack will probably get the stoppage here. As for the final fight of the main card breakdowns here, the first fight of the main card, we have, just one sec here. We have Peter Yan taking on Song Yadong. Another close one here in terms of the odds. Yan minus 125, Yadong plus 105. Liam, does Peter Yan avoid 4 straight losses?
I think so, but I wouldn't feel very confident in it. He's a good fighter, man. And I've only faded him in the UFC, but he's typically like minus 250 against another top guy, right? So it's like, I've been looking to get on the other side of Petr Yan more often than not. I had Aljamain Sterling, I had Merab Dvalishvili, and I had Corey Sandhagen. So 2 out of 3, nice plus money underdogs, made a lot of money fading this guy. But now he's like minus 120 against Song Yadong, who I think is a very good fighter. But I was not very impressed by Song's last fight. I thought it was kind of a step back in terms of his performance. And he had said things that I thought made sense in terms of why that fight didn't go the way he expected it to. He said, my friend Sumadarji got choked out and, he was on a losing skid. And, it made me really emotional before I went out there. And that's kind of what it looked like to me. He didn't look like a guy who was, ready to go out there and be a killer and be super aggressive. And I think that's what he needs to be on Saturday, right? Because Petr Yan's a difficult guy, especially the longer a fight goes, right? He builds into fights. He gets better and better as the fight goes on. Ask Sean O'Malley. I think in the early going, Sean was having a lot more success. Later on in the fight, he was having to dig deeper. He was having to really, scrape out very close rounds. And so I think that what we've seen from Petr Yan is he's a guy that has taken a lot of damage. He's been in a lot of hard fights. He's been injured before, hasn't always gotten along great with the company. So those are the negatives. Those are the downsides to a guy like Petr Yan. But on the other side here, Song Yadong is a guy that is still just 26 years of age. And so I do think he could easily be rebuilt if he loses this fight. Is it easy to rebuild Petr Yan off 4 straight losses? No, I think that would kind of be the end of his run as a top guy in the UFC. So there's a lot of stakes in this fight, I feel. And I think the stakes are a little bit higher for Petr Yan. So is he able to respond to that? He's 31 years of age. Maybe he's just past his prime. He can't find that same, standard, that same mark again. But Merab Dvalishvili is going to make a lot of people look bad, right? He's not going to be plus 225 against anybody ever again in the UFC in all likelihood because he attempted like 50 takedowns that night. So I just think that he's faced a lot of really tough, difficult circumstances in his recent fights, and recency bias is a real thing, right? One guy moving in the right direction, winning a bunch of fights, looks like the guy. The other guy loses a couple fights in a row. Now people are ready to sell him down the river a little bit. That's kind of a scene that doesn't normally work out in MMA, but I'm still seeing a lot of love, public and otherwise, for Yan, right? I still see people betting on Petr Yan. So for me, keep my hands clean in this one. I think it's a great, well-matched fight. I think it's super competitive. And more often than not, I think we're looking at a 29-28 or one of these guys suffers a very rare KO loss. I think they're both quite durable, but they're going to stand in the pocket and trade wildly. I don't think either one of them has perfect defense. You look at O'Malley versus Petr Yan, they both rock the damn shit out of each other. Like in a 30-second sequence, they both hit each other so hard that they like stumbled all over the octagon because they didn't defend the shots that were coming back, and they're both good counterers. So like Petr wanted to do a little offense. He got cracked. He starts running away. He starts like going back behind his hands. And then he's like, you know what? Screw this guy. He's got stupid hair. And he punched him so hard that O'Malley starts wobbling all over the place. Like this guy hits very hard. He's a very serious fighter. I think he's got a bad attitude as well. You got a guy like Merab. He literally said before the fight, I would kill myself if I lose this fight. I take my money at plus 225 every time for that guy. That's not how I think Song is approaching this. I think he's a guy who's ready to have fun and, have a big fight and go out there and put on a show. But he said, I'm more excited to just step out of the apex and get back in front of a crowd. I don't think Petr Yan's thinking about that. I think he's like, I need to find any way I can to win this fight, whether that's mixing in a takedown, whether that's trying to knock this guy's head off, whether that's taking more damage than I normally would be willing to find a win. I just think you're going to get the best of Petr Yan this weekend. I wouldn't want to fade him either.
Yeah, one of the issues I've had with Yan in the past is it's not that he doesn't take fights seriously, it's that he just seems to kind of go in there and just kind of do whatever he feels like. He doesn't really seem to have a real game plan. He doesn't try to exploit his opponents. He just kind of goes out there, tries to get in their face, pressure, be tough, and kind of basically hope that his will outmatches theirs. And works against mid-level guys, not so much the elite. And also, by the way, have almost 700 live listeners. Please keep the questions coming. We'll be answering more, especially coming up here after the main card breakdowns wrap up. As Matt Dunbar says, 3-round fight definitely hurts Yan here. Yeah, so Yan, he's been a bit inconsistent in his fights. He's been not necessarily a slow starter, but he'll be a slow starter at times, but also just have slow rounds at times. He'll start fast and then kind of take a dip at some points. Again, it seems like he doesn't really have a real game plan. Look at, say, when he fought Merab. I mean, I ended up picking Petr Yan there. I think I might have actually – no, I didn't bet him there, but I definitely picked him there. I definitely did not bet Merab. But that was a total miss on my part. I should have absolutely bet Merab there. In hindsight, it's very obvious that he is a better fighter, more likely winner in that style matchup. But going into that fight, I'd actually mentioned how I don't like how Yan is going to probably not have that diligent of a game plan, whereas Merab will. And then you saw in that fight the exact difference between someone with a diligent game plan and someone who's just kind of going out there and trying things. Merab was determined to do what he did with the wrestling and the grappling every minute of every round, dominated, had a very good performance. Petr Yan, meanwhile, looked completely lost, completely listless. There were zero adjustments, zero improvements as the fight went on. He looked like an absolute amateur. And we've seen that in multiple fights from him at the elite level now, where it's not that he's unskilled, it's not that he's not durable or lacks power or cardio. He has all the skills and cardio and all that in the intangibles. It's the game planning, it's the mental aspect. He has to put together real game plans. Now, coming off of a string of losses here, taking a relative step down, although a very, very tough opponent, this is the shit or get off the pot moment for him. Either he's going to come out with a proper game plan and show that he can actually hang with top level fighters, and he'll go out there and win the fight in that case, or he could actually go out there and kind of have just kind of the listless type of performance he's had in the past where he's just kind of trying whatever. He still might win, but that to me will show me that he's never going to be elite again, that he's just going to beat mid-level contenders like a Song Yadong, but not ever a Merab again. If I want to see that he has a chance against the Merabs of the world, and maybe he never has a chance against them, I want to see him go out there with a technical, proper game plan where you see a focus and a determination from him where he's not just out there winging it. And so far, whether you're talking about wins or losses, I have not seen that from him. So until I do, his chances as a truly elite fighter are dead in the water, in my opinion. In terms of the stylistic matchup here, I don't really see Song having any advantage outside of the pure punching power. Other than that, Jan is pretty much better in every way. Pace, volume, toughness, durability. I would say pure one-punch shot power. Song has the advantage, excuse me. Other than that, I don't really see anything. So again, if Jan is going out there and it's just let's just kind of, try whatever, and he goes out there and starts getting hit with some big punches, and he's in a bit of a firefight, and maybe he edges it out, but the judges go close to the other way and give Song Yadong the win, that's a real possibility here. But if he goes out there and is like, all right, here's what I'm better at, here's what I'm worse, and he tries to capitalize on what he's better at and exploit what Yadong is worse at, this should be Petr Yan's fight to lose. It's just, this is not just a string of losses from him where he's shown no game plan. It's his entire career, even in his wins. He just pressures and goes balls to the wall and doesn't have a game plan. So I feel like if he shows up at his best, this is Petr Yan's fight to lose, but I just don't have faith in him. So for me, from a betting perspective, this is a total pass. From a picking perspective, I will ultimately go with Petr Yan, probably by a close decision, a 29-28 type of firefight performance. Aside from that, is there anything you want to touch on the prelims, Liam? Obviously, we already touched on the Almeida and Blades fight earlier. If you guys missed that, we talked about that after the main event, kind of a random little secret breakdown hidden in there in the middle. But other than that, there's still some other good fights. Anything you want to touch on here? And of course, also, again, you listeners out there, 750 of you out there, please get your questions going. We'll answer any that you happen to have.
Yeah, man, I think we got a great card overall. I think I could touch on each fight on the prelim super briefly. I mean, for one thing, a couple live underdogs on the prelims as far as I'm concerned, right? Like you got some big favorites, no doubt about it. I understand that. But when you're looking at like Caitlin Chukagian plus 175, I think that's something I'm going to be considering, right? I don't know where I'm going to get to on some of these fights, but like Macy Barber at minus 205, I was on her last time. It was plus 175 against a strawweight, right? It's just like recency bias. Is that baked into the line there? Caitlin Chukagian's typically going, 50-50, 60-40 with the best women in the division. Have we been proven that Macy Barber's of that ilk yet? I'm not sure that we have. So again, a little presumptuous. Go ahead.
I will say there was an interview that she did earlier this week, I believe. I think she had was it multiple miscarriages or something that went on? It was something like...
That is what she said.
Insanely devastating. And she literally, in no uncertain terms, said, I'm only fighting to take my mind off of that. There was no, I'm so ready to get back in. I'm the best. It was literally, I've suffered devastating emotional losses. I need something to distract myself and feel alive again. That I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, I think people might be overreading it because, the truth is, I don't know what to make of that, right? Mm-hmm. The miscarriages, I don't know what to make of that physically, mentally, otherwise. I'm not a woman, especially, right? So I have literally no frame of reference. But what I will say is Caitlin Chukagian going to forget how to fight in 12 months? Because that's the thing. She's been gone 12 months, 16 months, whatever it is. Did she forget how to fight? Her husband's a pro MMA guy, jiu-jitsu, wrestling type guy. Are they just not training at all? I believe she's probably kept in the training room this whole time. So then the question is all right, well, what version of her is going to show up? If it's an approximation of what we saw last time, I just don't know how, like, what tools Barber would use to cover this price. Because if you think about it, Luke, I've actually faded Caitlin Chookagian in the past. She's a Renzo Gracie girl. I don't like admitting that, but like Jessica Andrade at minus 141, let's load that up for a bunch of units. She was minus 141, and she is a much more proven woman at 125. As well as 115 and 135. Like, she's competed across the gambit of weight classes, way more proven power puncher, less of a favorite than Macy Barber in this spot. So it's just like recency bias could be baked in the line, or maybe they're just saying like, hey, Caitlin Chookagian is not going to show up like herself. But the last thing I'll mention on that one is like, I saw her on Instagram looking like she's on steroids, okay, saying I took my supplement stack from Gordon Ryan, and I'm like, and then Gordon's responding in the comments. You can go look at this yourself. This is not me making this up. He said, no more USADA, eye emoji. I was like, are they just like openly discussing cheating? And like, I think they are. And like, I don't think anybody cares anymore. I think the UFC just moved on. If you guys look, there's a list that came out of all the champions that have been tested.
Yeah, barely
it's like
anyone.
3 of them. It's like 3 of them all year. So I think the new testing program is like, hey, did you take steroids? No? Great. Like, yes. I just think that people might get the wool pulled over their eyes on this one. Because the last thing I'll mention here, Macy Barber is talking about, yeah, I'll take the title shot at 135. I'll take the title. Who the hell invited you to a title shot at 135? You didn't earn a title shot at 125 yet. What on God's green earth are you talking about? So I like her, confidence, but I think it's spilled over into arrogance more than once in her career. And I think we're right back to that point. Right, you beat Amanda Hebos. It was a close fight. You beat Andrea Lee. You might not even have deserved that one. It's like there's a couple she's been getting lucky getting one over the line, and maybe that's to say, hey, the judges are going to rob it in her favor. If there's been one person that the judges have not gone against, no matter what, it's freaking Caitlin Chookagian. So just seems to me like a couple of times, like these lines are just like people foregone conclusion. Like I'm seeing what I want to see. You could always see what you want to see in these things. I always just look at how is this done in the past. For example, last week, Ayman Zahabi, he never been more than a plus 210 underdog. And by the way, he won when he was. So it's like people are just ready to say, no, this guy can't win a fight. Caitlin Chookagian can't win a fight. She's not nothing but win fights, basically, in the UFC that weren't for a title or against the number one contender, you know?
Yeah, when I first was looking at the line, I had the same thought as you. I was like, I think Chookagian's going to make this a tough one, probably a 15-minute decision. They're both going to have their moments. Do I, even if Macy Barber wins, trust her as a 2-1 favorite? Women's MMA decision? Absolutely not. And then I saw that interview and I was like, I don't know if I could consider this anymore. It was like the way she said it too. It wasn't just like, oh, it was a hardship I went through, but here's why I'm going to be so much better going forward. It was like, yep, I'm in a terrible situation and you should not have any faith in me, but I'm here. So yeah, it's still honestly, despite that, as crazy as it sounds, it's still a dog or pass. Like, this is a fight that's probably going to be 29-28, a close one, no matter who wins. So any other thoughts on the other fights? So I know you said you wanted to touch on pretty much all of them.
Yeah, for sure. I could just breeze through here. I won't give a full breakdown for all these. Gamrot, great fighter, especially as an underdog, fantastic. As a big favorite, he hasn't done it in the UFC. Like, he's lost several times as a big favorite now. Basically, the only times he's fumbled the bag. Beneil Dariush hasn't looked good since that fight, and he dropped him so badly with the most telegraphed left hand you've ever seen in your life. So again, am I saying that you should favor RDA to win the fight? No, God, no. But the sharps bet it at minus 250, and that's why that number is long gone. Now at minus 450, I think you're in face plant L territory. I think people could be surprised. I mean, RDA, what did we just talk about in the last fight? People getting back on steroids. There's no more USADA. This is a guy that's tested positive before. Very skilled fighter. Where is he terrible, right? Somebody commented on my YouTube channel. I thought it was hysterical, Luca, because I gave a whole breakdown for why I thought maybe that line was a little bit off. And then they commented back, this guy just got out wrestled by Vicente Luque, who can't grapple. Vicente Luque has 5 UFC wins by submission. Vicente Luque has a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. People just make shit up when they want to bet somebody. And
one of the best.
I just look at the facts and evidence, bro. That's it. And sometimes I'll be wrong, but the facts and evidence say that's not true.
Luque is one of the best dynamic submission finishers in the welterweight division all time. Like you watch this
Fact.
dude's subs, it's like
5 out of 15 UFC wins are via submission. That's a
like
third for the people at home that ain't good
the
at math. Like,
the way he gets them, they go from 0 to 100. It's not like, oh, he took the back, he won the first round, 10-9, he took the back again, round two, he's now working for the choke. Okay, mid round two, submission win, rear naked. No, it's they're striking, they're brawling, and then all of a sudden, 5 seconds later, he's with his arms up after a submission victory. Like that's Luque's submission game. He is an incredibly deadly, lethal type of grappler. He's not any kind of positional grappler.
and even still, he went out there, couldn't finish RDA, and RDA went the full 25 minutes. So people are telling me that he can't beat Gamrot. And I'm just like, that seems very presumptuous to me. Because I'll tell you guys what, the last time he fought a contemporary 155er who's younger than him was Renato Moicano. He was a favorite. I had 7.5 units on him, and he beat the absolute tar out of that man. So I'll just tell you guys, like, I think the rumors of RDA's demise have been greatly exaggerated. That's all I'll say. Could he lose this weekend? Absolutely. He fights a brutal strength of schedule. But how many times in his career has he been plus 350? Like, come on. Then you look, Pedro Munoz. Do I want to go lay money against Pedro Munoz? I'll tell you guys what. Who gave Sean O'Malley a pretty tough run, and then it was a no contested out? Pedro Munoz. Who just gave Cheeto Vera a hard fight to earn the title shot? Pedro Munoz. And now everybody's ready to say Kyler Phillips, the guy who's gassed out on the regional scene, the guy who's gassed out in the UFC, the guy whose best wins or what? Like, yeah, he's a good fighter, solid guy. But I don't know that he's proven enough to be minus 200 against a proven commodity like Pedro Munoz. And I've not been making a habit of trying to fade Pedro throughout his career because it's not plus EV, right? So a couple of things to mention there. People that are just parlay boys on the early portions of these cards, maybe it'll work out. Maybe it won't, right? Another thing I mentioned, Luca, you got to watch the weigh-ins for this guy, CJ Vergara. He is as likely to miss weight in the UFC as he is to make weight in the UFC. That's a historical fact. He missed weight again. Last time, my boy Tetsuro Taira said no problem at 129. Took him down multiple times. Why? He's a big flyweight. He's a big guy. He's strong himself. He's a very good grappler. Asuam Abayev, if I had to make one criticism of the guy, he's a talented fighter. He's got real skills. He's a little bit undersized, even for this flyweight division. He's like 5'4". There's a fight of him getting picked up and thrown all over the place by Tagir Ulanbekov. Like, I'm just saying, you look at that fight with Tagir, it looked like two different weight classes. Tagir's a guy that still makes 125 pounds. So Asuam Abayev, not a very big guy, opens minus 142 on DraftKings. He's minus 550. The parlay boys are out in full force. I'm just saying, that's not me. And so if that's how you play the game, then pick your spots sparingly. Despain. I think Despain is being set up to win. I think Despain is being brought here because he's a fun guy. But the truth is, guys, what does Taekwondo have to do with like high-level fighting? All it tells you is that this guy can strike a little bit and that this guy is the most dexterous heavyweight, right? He could throw a kick over his head. I don't think there's another guy in the heavyweight division that could do that, frankly. But what we don't know about Despain is as much as what we know about him. Can he fight for 8 minutes? I'll tell you guys, he didn't look like he had the greatest cardio I've ever seen in Taekwondo. I wasted half my life watching the damn Taekwondo matches. He got bronze medal in the Olympics on a walkover, if y'all know what I'm saying. This guy didn't show up. He's looking around. It's a 2-minute video. I was waiting for the whole time for the fight to start, and my man just gets his hand raised, and that's that. So when you look, Despain, I think, has real upside here. I think the crowd's behind him. I think Josh Parisian's a tall glass of milk. But when you're talking about laying minus 300 indication, I'd rather have the minus 250 on the under than I would minus 300 on Despain, who could fall apart based on cardio at any point in this fight. That's kind of my humble opinion about that one. So when you're looking through, there's a lot of big favorites on here. Are all of them justified? No, they're a pay-per-view card. And what happens on pay-per-views, Luca? Casual bettors sit there and they look at the favorites and they go ding, 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 Poirier. Like, or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like, they look through and they find a couple names that they like, maybe one or two underdogs, but they're mostly clicking favorite, and hoping for the best. And I'm doing the opposite, where I'm going, why could this fall apart? Where are the potential landmines here? And those are a couple of the ones that I noted where I think the line is a little bit blown out in relation to the likelihood that they win. Should they be favored? I would argue all of them should be favored. Should they be favored to the extent that they are? Is that real or is that manufactured? I'd argue it's more manufactured on this card.
Before we continue here, just recap of the main card picks for those who missed it. Personally, for me, I went with, in the main event, Marlon Vera, co-main event, Benoit Saint-Denis, then Kevin Holland, Jack Della Maddalena, and Piotr Jan. How about you, Liam?
So my picks on the main card, let me go back to my article here so I make sure I give it to you straight up. I took Marlon Chito Vera to get the job done. I took Benoit Saint-Denis inside the distance. I took Michael Venom Page by KO or split decision. Don't feel great about it. Low confidence on these ones. Jack Della Maddalena to defeat Gilbert Burns by KO. That was my prediction. More bullish on the under 2.5 there. And then Piotr Jan defeating Song Yadong. Again, I don't feel great about any of those last 3 picks that I gave you, but I got to pick somebody, right? They're closely lined fights. I'll tell you the way I feel, but I'm also going to tell you when I feel more strongly and when I don't feel strongly. And I think that those are really competitive, closely lined fights for a reason. I think either guy could win. So,
Any thoughts on Matt's comment there?
I do. I think that Despain is a more athletic guy than Parisian. I think he's a better mover. I think he has the limb length that he could surprise people with his own submission. That's a fact. But when you look at Josh Parisian, he is a more experienced guy. He has been out there for longer. He has more experience on the mats. Do I think that that's going to matter? Honestly, I don't. I think Alain Badeau should have finished this guy. I think Alain Badeau is one of the worst guys that's ever been signed to the UFC. That'll tell you everything you need to know about my opinion of Josh Parisian. I think he's been lucky to win the fights that he has in the UFC. I think Roque Martinez had a decent argument for beating him via split decision, God's honest truth. So when you look, he's not very good. He's one of the worst guys on the roster. I think they're bringing him into this fight to lose in embarrassing fashion. But again, can I trust Robles? They've priced this fight intentionally, right? They open at -5, -400 to say, come on, go take Josh Parisian. Try the +300. It's heavyweight. Anything could happen, right? I think he's going to get brutalized here. I think he's probably going to get hit with big shots early. And I honestly think that when they're both fresh, Robles might just submit him on pure athleticism, right? If you guys have ever been to jiu-jitsu, the best guy doesn't always win. I hate to tell you guys, like sometimes the better athlete, the stronger person can just dominate somebody physically. That's the truth. So I think that when you look at a guy like Josh Parisian, maybe he has a little more technical knowledge and details, but if this big 6'8" guy puts a knee on his chest and starts ripping on that Kimura, like my guy MMA line mover said, then I don't think that that's crazy. I just also don't believe, he's going to try to do that. I think he's going to try and kick this guy's head off, and I think it's going to work. So I think we're going to be done with this fight before we get started with this fight. But it's just a question of percentages. Does that happen at greater than 60, 70, 80% clip? It's like eventually you get to banana peel territory in the heavyweight division with a guy who has, 5.5 minutes of cage time or less.
Here's my big concern about him. Yeah, he's tall. I don't know what his exact height is. Some places say 6'6", some say 6'7", some say 6'8". Either way, he's very tall. I'm 6'8" myself, and for me, when I notice, like 240 is about the perfect weight for me in terms of my efficiency. As soon as I get to like 245, even I'm always lean, I'm always like 10% body fat, I notice it is noticeable how I start getting not just slower, like kind of more sluggish, but the toll it takes like to just move in general. He's 265. Like he's cutting weight to make this division, apparently, and he's 6'6", 6'7". Like there's no way in hell this dude's having good cardio with the Taekwondo style. That's the point I'm getting at. Also, worth noting, his last 3 fights are a combined 19 seconds. Literally 4 seconds, 3 seconds, and 12 seconds, all KOs. His only other fight, also a first-round KO. We have no idea if this man even has 5 minutes of cardio, and his style is Taekwondo wild flailing kicking. Again, as a 6'8" heavyweight myself, I know the type of toll that takes. Yeah, I'm not a pro athlete, but I still know the difference that toll takes versus throwing jabs or straight rights. There's not a chance in hell this man is having 15 minutes of cardio with that style. So it's either he's going to have to learn a measured approach to his game and kind of eliminate some of his strengths in a way, or he's going to go out there and just be a wild, flashy KO guy who either absolutely murders you in the first couple of minutes or absolutely falls apart and gets murdered himself. So not necessarily for this fight, but generally through his career, I think he's probably going to be one of those just guys who it's very stark contrast in his fight. He either is getting killed or going out there and doing the killing. I think he's going to be just one of those types of careers. In terms of this fight, kind of obvious what the UFC is trying to set up here. They want him to be the killer in this one. Like, no question about that. I think he'll probably go out there.
They want the Cubanos to be celebrating, lifting the flags, cheering early on in the night. I think that's why they brought him in here. And I think that Parisian is as good as gone if he loses this fight in all likelihood, right? Like he's kind of just been clinging to a UFC contract. He's not very good. He's got 5,000 Instagram followers. He's enhancement talent as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, like, does he have fighting experience? He's had 20 fights, but if you're getting finished in the first round by Martin Budai, I mean, let's be serious. That's not a very
Yeah.
good loss to have, you know? And if you lose to Martin and get outworked over 15 minutes, hey, more power to you, right? But when you're getting finished in the first round by him, really bad look.
Yeah, and also, as MMA Line Mover says, Mick Maynard loves this guy for sure. Yeah, definitely, this is a setup fight. No, no question about that. They are trying to get him to win and get Josh Parisian out of there. The thing is, if you're literally like, not to use like the whole Joe Rogan thing where he used to say back in the day, like, if you were to put in a computer program the perfect guy to beat this guy, this is who would spit out. He used to always say that, and the guy would go and get clobbered still. But if you were to like put like the opposite of that, like the perfect heavyweight for this dude to go out there and land some wild Taekwondo jackassery and send this dude's head into the fifth row, it's Josh Parisian, a guy with no striking defense, no head movement, no footwork, and a bad shin. Like, he's going to stand there and watch as the shin goes right into his forehead. Like, this is what this fight has been booked for, no question about it. If he does not go out there and get the win, well, that's all the more damning of his potential as a prospect. But any other thoughts you have on the rest of the prelims?
I would just say that, I'm hoping for probably some violence in those other fights. I mean, the three that we didn't mention, Marina Moroz and Joanne Wood, can't bet on Joanne Wood in my view, just because she's coming into this acknowledging, hey, this is a retirement fight. She did say, I want to go out on a win. I almost didn't take this fight because I won my last one. And like, now she just said, I felt good enough to take the camp and whatever, but I'm moving on after this. I'm going to be coaching. I'm going to be doing that. And she said she wanted to get the win back against Moroz. The thing is, I can't trust Moroz either. Minus 225 for an OnlyFans model that's on a 2-fight losing skid. The truth is, though, man, I just looked and I said to myself, is Moroz justified in losing her last 2 fights? Common opponent Jennifer Maia, who got cut from the UFC because she's boring, not because she's bad at fighting. She got cut from the UFC because she's boring. Her only finish in the UFC was over Joanne Wood. Marina Moroz has 2 finishes in the UFC. One of them is over Joanne Wood. Joanne Wood has been eminently finishable. I saw her finished in person at UFC Columbus as well. Alexa Grasso, first-round submission. Didn't have to wait for her to get tired. Just took her down and finished her easily on the ground. How about Talia Santos, right? My girl, plus 400, should have had that UFC title around her waist, but instead didn't get it. Okay, no problem. She submitted her in the first round. Didn't do that to anybody else, basically. I just feel like when no, I have not. I don't do that level of research.
Was that part of your tape study this week?
It is of a sexual nature. Not every OnlyFans is of a sexual nature. That's all I'll say. I have definitely heard that it is of a sexual nature. So
you've heard from a friend.
I've heard from the people in my comment section. You know as well as I do. There are some dirty minds in the MMA business. But what I will say, man, is that is not inspiring confidence. If anything, I would almost just lean into somebody get violently finished here. Somebody make a critical error. 2 women that are both distracted by other things going on in their life. Somebody just do something stupid, please. Armbar from guard seems like a very fitting end to that one way or the other. The thing is, though, Marina Moroz last time out fell on the sword of Karine Silva, right? Karine Silva, a girl who's young, on the come up, hungry, wants to be there. So to lose that fight is like fair play, right? And by the way, it was another rematch. It was a rematch where they said, hey, we want you to run this one again. And this is going to suck. Like, sorry, I know you got the win over her in the past before she was good. She's going to beat you this time, but then we'll give you Joanne Wood in her retirement fight. That is, at least for me, I feel how they kind of got her into this situation. So that's my gut feeling on the curtain jerker. And the last things I'll say, Felipe Lins and Kutalaba, Pereira and Oleg Sejcik. It seems like 2 guys that are going to hammer into each other in both of those fights, 170, 205, or excuse me, 185, 205, 2 weight classes that lead to a lot of volatility. Feel like both those fights could end inside the distance.
Yeah, one thing I'll say as far as the whole OnlyFans thing is, I know it seems like a snarky comment to say or like just kind of making fun of them. It's a legitimate gripe because, as I've talked about on past podcasts, living in Las Vegas for 6 years, although now finally moving out, that's why I'm not in my normal studio, packing everything up. In Vegas, I've run into multiple fighters who either in the UFC or outside the UFC who do the fighting and the OnlyFans thing. And when you talk to them, they tell you straight up in no uncertain terms, I don't want to be a fighter. I want to just do OnlyFans nonsense. And getting basically a couple fights in the UFC will get me a bunch of promotion. And I can be basically the next Paige Van Zandt. Like, there's countless fighters in the UFC and outside of it who literally only view the UFC as a stepping stone to OnlyFans promotion. And so when you see a girl with an OnlyFans account and people are like, OnlyFans, making jokes about it. It's a legitimate gripe because it's not just, oh, this is a side gig that they have. It makes you wonder, is that their actual main priority? Is that their main moneymaker? And in a lot of cases, it is. But in this fight, yeah, whether Rose gets a finish here or you have to go to OnlyFans to see someone getting finished, either way, I do think we're going to see a finish there on Saturday night. Calderwood, or Wood now, in the past, not been very good in terms of submission defense. Obviously, Rose likes the submissions. Rose also shown some heart issues, so I could see a finish there, despite it being a WMMA fight. I feel like that has a higher propensity for a finish than usual. In terms of the Pereira fight, yeah, that's going to be chaos. That's two chaotic fighters, as Liam said. They're going to meet in the middle and basically cause destruction until one of them goes down. Uh, yeah, it's funny how many fighters in the UFC, like, either fans want them to do it or are already doing it. It's just like, I can't blame them. Like, it goes hand in hand. If you have a bunch of incel MMA fans who are willing to, fork up money from their mom's basements, like, I guess
Can we
more
swear
power
on
to
here,
you.
Luca?
Oh, for sure.
Fighting and fucking, it's all the same. That's an expression Sean Strickland used.
I was gonna say Sean Strickland.
Sounds about right for the people that he's brought to the sport. God bless.
Yep, yeah, it's there's definitely some crossover amongst those two fan bases. So I think that'll do it for our thoughts here on this card. Of course, we'll be back tomorrow following the event to live stream. Hopefully, it's a good night of fights. Hopefully, also it is a good night for the official bets. Again, if you want to tail those, if you're not already signed up, patreon.com/FuriesFightPicks. All third-party tracked and verified, have bets from multiple handicappers, including Liam. He just hit a plus 600 last week. Had a nice run this year, as well as since he joined the site last year. Only have 7 losing weeks over the last 7 losing months. That is on average only 1 losing week per month. We did actually have a losing week last week rather, so should be on track for a few wins in a row here if that trend keeps up. Again, all third-party tracked and verified. You can check out the records over on the site. Again, links to the third parties and all of that. So check it out at furiesfightpicks.com or patreon.com/furiesfightpicks. Also a bunch of other content as well. Podcasts, video breakdowns, betting instructionals, cheat sheets with tape study notes, trends, weigh-in analysis, all that goodness. Liam will be back with me for the post-fight podcast live stream. But in the meantime, again, hopefully you guys profit on your bets. I'm Luca Fury, and until next time, thank you for watching.